Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 9, Episode 8 of our weekly Q&A video / podcast. If you're on YouTube, links in the description to get this on a lot of podcasting apps and as an RSS feed. And if you are on the podcast, you can't find us on YouTube. We don't actually exist. We've deleted our channel. So, good luck with that. Anyways, getting into our content for the week, our first thing, we want to come back to last week's discussion of synergies for gear and character abilities. Right. Stuff that stacks, stuff that doesn't stack.
Right. And I wanted to bring this up only because, not that it matters now, because this is one of the things that doesn't stack, but I guess I like going over some of the things that used to work historically as a sort of like maintaining an oral history of what the game used to be, because it's not... I think you get a different perspective on the game when you're new than when you've been playing for as many years as we have.
For sure.
So one thing that used to stack was healing. So back in the day, because healing stacked, you would have huge drawn-out fights. Some of the original gears that healed, for example, you could heal 30% of your health with one special one if you were carrying both mutated bone spikes and knife collection, or heal 75% with a special 2 if you had cybernetic exoskeleton, Kryptonian battlesuit, and Martian hunter garb. That's huge. And if you could keep on doing that over and over again, then sure, you could do a bit of damage, but when they're healing that much, you'd be spending... I remember there was one fight against Man of Steel Superman, because back then he was really the only option where you get your power back.
Yeah.
And he would heal so much and do it over and over again that there was a fight that dragged on for like 15 minutes before being able to finish it, because he would just heal so much.
This is brutal. Yeah, and so that was something that I'm glad that they kept out of the game, because you should be able to either win or lose a fight. In 15 minutes, one individual fight. There should be no fight that you are just, that drags on that long. I remember we had a commenter that sent us a screenshot of a fight they had that was 42 minutes or something, because they refused to let go, and it was a point of personal pride. And I have a lot of respect for that, but also, that's a brutal thing that nobody should ever be subjected to unless they choose it for themselves.
Did I mention this? I must have mentioned this. You know that glitch when Raven
becomes invincible, and you tried to make the fight last as long as you could
because she was invincible. Yeah, I had Batman Ninja Catwoman, and I was trying to so I could heal properly. I was triggering her special 2 over and over and over again.
And I remember that the punchline of that story is that you recorded, but then it crashed and you lost it.
No, we had it. We lost it when we lost.
Oh, when you lost the hard drive.
Hard drive on our old computer.
Okay, yeah.
And that was the hard drive that failed, and we lost that footage.
Yeah,
back in the day.
Yeah. That's the last thing I think we wanted to say about that, about synergies, because it's easier, like we always say with the glitches, right? It's easier to know what there is synergies for and think about it that way. It's harder to think about negatives. It's harder to go, what is there not a synergy for that you'd expect there to be?
Yeah.
So our next question comes from Ruiz and Vatcha, and they say, I suppose by underrated, and this is talking about Red Sun Green Lantern.
Right. I pulled this question up earlier than some of the older ones, only because it was relevant. It feels more like a discussion that we're having, right? That was from last week.
So they say, I suppose by underrated, I mean how good they are compared to how often I see them in online multiplayer. I feel like I very rarely face a Red Sun team, and it's so good. Also, counterpoint to yours, I see a ton more Hawkgirl, Blackest Night than I do Green Lantern. Anyway, just thought I'd say my piece. Thanks for the content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a totally valid use of the term underrated. But a lot of what the teams that you face and the characters that you face is completely influenced by the teams that you run.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, you might see a ton of Blackest Night Hawkgirl. I don't even think Blackest Night Hawkgirl is nearly as good or nearly as underrated as Hawkgirl Prime. And just to prove that point, the footage you're watching here is a team of Hawkgirl Prime, as you can see, Lucha Bane, and Batgirl Prime. And I think very rarely does Hawkgirl Prime get the appreciation that she deserves, because when you look at this team, this is one example where we split the power tag and power generating gears. One on Lucha Bane, who's got Tensu Totem, one on Batgirl, who's got Master's Death Card. to tag them in and out alternatingly to really drop a nuke every time they tag in.
Yeah.
So the other way you think about when people are underrated is whether people actually respect them or not. Mm-hmm. And I guess because that who you face in online play is so subjective and has less to do with what people are actually using than it has to do with how your teams are matched up.
Yeah.
I base a lot of it on how people are talking about it in comments, but probably more so in the Injustice subreddit for the mobile game. And you look at all those tier lists, and I think even Blackest Night Hawkgirl gets way more love. I mean, basically because she's the Blackest Night teammate of Flash, she gives him an automatic revive.
Yeah.
If she was nothing else, even if she was just dead weight, the fact that she's there doubles the effectiveness of your Blackest Night Flash.
Mm-hmm.
Red Sun Green Lantern, lots of people love him. I mean, I think there's no disagreement about how effective he is at making your team really, a Red Sun team really hardy.
Yeah, a lot of people get elevated just based off of who they're next to. If you're with somebody on a good team, you tend to get sort of raised up if you're part of a good combo, even if you're not as good on your own, or even if your individual contribution is just your name, right?
Yeah, and I think also if your strategy for handling a Lucha Bane tagging in, like stun, or just I guess a random Cloak of Destiny, then you probably have a lot more respect for Red Sun Green Lantern.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, this team with Hawkgirl Prime, super effective. Super fast. I don't know that there's a faster team than this other than Flashpoint. And you're seeing it right now.
That's one of the interesting things when you're talking about underrated is because it matters a lot exactly how you define and how you think about and the information you have in evaluating how other people feel.
Right.
So you don't have enough information by yourself ever to say if somebody's underrated or not. It relies on sort of an imperfect knowledge of the world outside of your own head.
That's actually a really good point. I hadn't sort of framed it like that, but yeah. Because other things you can make up and answer yourself, no other context, just based on knowledge of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And getting into other people's head is kind of unreliable.
Mm-hmm. And so even if we have the exact same sort of defining criteria, which that's the other problem with underrated, right? Because we are talking about different things, right? How often you face it on online multiplayer. Is that how highly people are rating it? I mean, that's one way to say underrated is, it never gets any play, right?
Yeah.
But all of these things, all of these sources of information are biased in one way or another. Even going on and looking at tier lists. I think tier lists are probably the most direct way to get a sense of how other people feel about characters.
Yeah.
But unless the tier list includes everybody, what you're doing is you're getting a sense of usually how people feel about key characters, right?
Yeah. And then, I guess the way to really do it is once you decide what tier list they are on, then decide how much that differs from where you think they should be.
Yeah.
So where do you find that separation, right? Because you can be really good, but if people recognize that they're really good, they're not underrated.
If you think they're S tier and somebody else thinks they're A tier or A minus, are they really underrated? Are they the most underrated? Or does it have to be the biggest disparity? Is it the one that people consistently rank lower than you think they should be? Or is it the one that sometimes gets ranked furthest distance from where you think they should be?
Because Solomon Grady deserves to be low.
Yeah.
Hawkgirl does not. She is S tier. To me, for an advanced player, late game with full options in the gears, she is totally top tier. Like I don't think there's anybody better because nobody else can do what she does as well as she does, and she makes the entire team better. And you take away the vulnerability. Like a Lucha Bane and Batgirl team is potentially vulnerable. Yeah. Like Lucha Bane is the classic glass cannon where he is. I don't think anybody else can nuke a team the same way he can, except maybe Batgirl. But I think he does it better. But his health is lower than hers.
And used to be Ares.
That's true.
He can still kind of nuke a team, but not the same way.
Not the same way, because anytime you can nuke a team on a special 1 is way better than nuking on a special 2.
Yeah.
Because once you whiff, once there's a revive, a resurrection, then you're vulnerable until you can regenerate that second bar of power.
Yeah. So there we go. Our next question, I guess it comes sort of as 2 questions. And this first one sort of seems like it's going in one direction and then takes like a weird sort of turn a little bit. So Chandler .3 says, quick question, do you know if this game will get any more updates? And this game is dead. Which is sort of like a answering in their own questions. Like, will this game get any more updates? This game is dead. Why do you still cover it? Which is not where I was expecting it to go.
I'm getting whiplash from the changes.
Yeah,
it's just...
it was like a question and then a statement and then another question. Yeah. So that one, and then the related one.
I already answered. I answered that in the comments originally. I said, if we don't cover it, who will? That was my attempt to take a different direction too, right? Because the question really is, why are you wasting your time? And I'm intentionally misinterpreting it as, well, why are you the ones covering it? Well, because nobody else will.
Yeah, and then the next question comes from Michael Kontogoulas, and they say, how do you guys stay motivated to play a dead game that has not had a meaningful update in over 2 years?
Has it only been 2 years? Feels like it's longer.
Yeah, I don't know. Injustice for me is without a doubt the best mobile game ever, but I just can't play it anymore when there are no new characters or events. I even started a new account like 2 years ago, but it was practically impossible to make progress as you could only buy useful packs with money. I do, however, respect your dedication in this game and can only hope that Warner Brothers will one day update the game and at least add a couple of new characters, or a couple new characters, sorry.
So it's funny because I saw this happen, I think, with Mortal Kombat X. I haven't played it in a long time. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they were as successful with this. All right, so what happened is, in the late stage of each game, late in the life cycle, and I consider we're like way at the end of the life cycle of Injustice, the first one, that they introduced sort of new categories that made it impossible to quickly complete your collection.
Mm-hmm. They introduced something to really make it drag out the time that you need to get everything maxed out.
Right. And I guess theoretically it's meant to extend the shelf life of that particular change before a new change has to happen. So what I'm talking in a roundabout way about the metal characters.
Yeah.
And they even made an improvement, because at the beginning I think it took 40-something copies of metal characters in order to fully promote them to Elite 7. Mm-hmm. And now they reduced it to, I don't know, like 20-something copies, which is still huge. Yeah. And one interesting data point is that until the most recent Phantom Zone event, we had not, up until then, had enough Valorium alloy to fully max out in the passive and the specials of all the metal characters, even though we'd played every single Phantom Zone event, paid for every single rebuy-in, and there's no other place you can get Valorium alloy. Mm-hmm. So, sure, it's a dead game, but we've been playing at a relatively high level. So what I'm talking about is we're doing the highest level, the elite crystals, not the lower level crystals, to get the most Valorium alloy. You can't get Valorium alloy anywhere else. And it still took us until just now. Mm-hmm. So there still is a challenge. If you're playing it as a collection game, as opposed to just a straight fighting game, it only recently died for us, like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. And, you know, it's something to do. It's that's the thing about routine. Is for a lot of these people, and we've mentioned this before, a lot of these people don't have a YouTube channel where their core audience is people who came for Injustice, and we sometimes talk about other stuff, right. And we'll have back and forths about other stuff. But we've got this thing going here, and it's pretty enjoyable. So that makes it a lot easier, and we've said this before, sort of tongue-in-cheek, like start a YouTube channel about it. Yeah. But what it really is that we've sort of got our little community whose main sort of connection to us at a fundamental level is the game Injustice. Right. And that makes it a lot easier of a sell for us, right? And how we spend our time is participating in this little community.
Right. And I'll tell you what, I mean, if you're looking for us to do something else, there's a weird intersection of stuff right now. Mm-hmm. And I think I can, unless somebody tells me otherwise in the comments, I can almost guarantee you that our core audience will not care about this.
Did you make a Wordle video?
All right, so everybody's heard about Wordle, right? Yeah. Maybe. All right, so let me maybe quickly explain it. It's a game, you have to guess a word. You get 6 guesses. It tells you, it's like Mastermind, where it tells you if it's a wrong guess, if a letter's a wrong guess, if it's the right guess for the letter but in the wrong place, or it's the right letter, right place. Yeah. And then those are clues so that to narrow it down before you run out of guesses in 6.
And then recently it's been purchased by the New York Times.
Right.
And you're not allowed to do inappropriate answers anymore.
I don't know about that. I just know that I've seen a bunch of variations, and one of the variations is Speed Wordle. Now, it's in a lot of ways, I think it's like Injustice fighting against opponents' teams. I'm pretty sure they tell you that it's against other people, but it's not. It's against, I think, an AI.
Oh, is it really?
It feels like it because sometimes I've played it long enough that sometimes the guesses that the other person makes are all the same. And the guesses that the other person, I'm doing air quotes, makes don't follow the rules of what you're allowed to guess.
Oh, and you've tried to do their guesses and it hasn't let you?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So I think, but it's Speed Wordle. So that's actually probably to me more important than the fact that it's supposed to be competitive.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty good at it. It's an intersection between me wanting to play games, me also being like a decent Boggle player.
Yeah.
So I've set up, if you're interested, if let me know if you're watching this or listening to this and you're interested and you want to see a strategy, and I can explain the strategy for Wordle play the same way that we've explained the strategy for Injustice, the way we set up teams and stuff. But that totally hits my sweet spot. Or my itch. It scratches my itch.
I think we've talked about this before. It would be interesting. You should try joining it from a laptop or something that you can very easily disconnect from internet.
Yeah.
And then start a game and then drop Wi-Fi and see if it plays out.
Right.
Because if it's designed simply, if it's designed in a way to eat the minimum amount of your data, it won't have a network check and it'll still finish out the game. The AI will still keep playing if you disconnect.
Right.
But I think we've talked about those things with bots before. Is because online games are way more compelling.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Multiplayer games tend to have a lot more sort of inherent value, and they can be the same thing over and over again. Like, I mean, one of the only reasons that we were able to play Injustice is there's no online mode. Even though it's not live online play, there would have been so much less content. It would have been so much simpler of a game. And a lot of, games that become and stay popular aren't single player games. They're games that have some community building around them. And live multiplayer is one of the easiest ways to do that.
Right.
And so there's a lot of online games that will spoof players because it's a great way to give your game longevity. The other thing about it is that if you don't have an initial player base, your game is essentially unplayable unless it launches with enough people and keeps enough people, and you can have a dead game really easily. Because the problem is if somebody comes in and they have to wait 5 minutes for a match, and then, their match is only whatever the minimum number of people to start it with, right? Nobody wants to play like a Battle Royale game that has like 3 players. Right? And these spaces aren't built for it. So one of the easy ways is to just spoof it and make it seem online. And there's been a thing where a bunch of mobile games have done that. It's become increasingly common. And what's interesting about that is that it's this weird sort of replication of an aesthetic that ends up feeling very sanitized. And if you realize it and you have that experience of, oh, I thought I was playing online, but I'm not playing online, it can feel a bit like a rug pull.
Right.
And there's a lot of stuff around that. I've seen games actually, interestingly, that leverage that idea of like real online interaction, the way that games can sort of live and die. Because it can be kind of sad when you have a game that you really love and then the player base dies, and then what you essentially have is no game afterwards. There's a game that I have not played a ton, and I've talked about before that I absolutely adore, Quantum League, right? That didn't have a big enough player base and it died. And I've had some of the most fun I've had playing a shooter with my friends of wildly different skill levels, right? Than I have in, almost any other shooter context. And that game just didn't have the player base. But I've also seen games where they are single player experiences that have purposefully been designed. Like I've seen, there's like a genre of like dead MMO walking simulators where it's a single player game. It was never online. And the conceit of the game is that you're going through an old, like, early 2000s MMO that it's been abandoned by the devs and that nobody plays anymore. So you're going through these spaces that they've designed to look like they were made for, thousands of people, and walking through them and sort of then picking through what's left almost like a world.
Apocalyptic
Yeah,
story.
it's like a post-apocalyptic story that's leveraging nostalgia for online spaces that have lost their sort of life force.
Right.
It's that you're playing through a ghost town post-apocalypse that is, like an early 2000s RPG.
Right. So you bring up a really good point that I agree with, where the real interaction, even the illusion of interaction, is so important and sort of enriches the experience of playing. So
Yeah.
I have a question for you then. Do you think, I guess it would depend on how much server costs are, but do you think it was a mistake when they pulled the ability to replay games so that you could watch other people attacking you and see what they did and how they fought and the strategy they used, whether they beat you or didn't, so that you could learn more from them and see other people playing? Because that's more of that.
Yeah.
That's actually closer to real interaction than it is playing against the AI and fighting multiplayer.
See, I think there was definitely value to it. I was personally sad about it, but I don't think for any one person that was the thing that made them keep playing. I don't know if that did anything to play base long term, and my bet, anyways, would be that the vast majority of people didn't actually look at it. I would bet you that only the most dedicated people looked at it. That it was the real sort of data crunching nerds, and that's us.
It was so good though. Like when you know what it was like being able to watch other people play in the strategy that they use and figure out what was possible.
It reminds me of professional athletes going into those rooms with their VHS tapes of the games and then plugging them in and then going, "Oh, where did I mess up? What did this person do?" When you're training,
Yeah.
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 You're studying your opponents so that you can learn from them.
But it's so much more helpful though before you've established your own sort of internal.
Yeah.
I don't know what's the framework.
Like play style when you've
like
when you haven't built that muscle memory. Yeah.
Those premises, those basic assumptions that you use to build up your strategy. Because it's not like we never have new strategies, but there's certain things that that seem obvious, and I don't know how much of that was just from gameplay, from watching other people play, or just thinking about or watching the AI play against us. Yeah, I mean, people are missing. I feel like there's a richness of the experience that people are missing out on because they never got to see those replays.
It's true, yeah, and so I think that's the one thing. Like, I wish Injustice, if this game had live multiplayer matches, that would be pretty cool. And I know netcode is hard for that. And the other thing about real live experiences versus simulated, online, like multiplayer experiences, is that the non-simulated ones can be pretty crummy if they're done poorly.
Yeah.
I know, like, the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, right, with Nintendo Online, that it could be really sort of slow and jittery, and if one person had a bad internet connection, it could really ruin the experience of a fight. And so, you obviously have to do those right, but when you do, there is so much replayability for a game that has sort of satisfying mechanics and just lets you play online. I mean, there's a reason why games like Gary's Mod had so much life in them, for being, really like a goalless sandbox simulator, is that, there was enough meat on those bones that you could do stuff and muck around, and you could spend, pretty much as long as you wanted, doing stuff, and you could really find the fun in it. And there's, I've never, I like single player games and I like story a lot, but I can really sink my teeth into multiplayer stuff in a way that I could never get the same sort of amount of time and put the same amount of energy into. And so, I mean, Injustice, I think, is in this slight limbo, right? Where I think it could be better on that front. Yeah. But I think it has just enough that there's some teeth to it. And then I think what pushes it over the edge is actually participating in the community that operates entirely separately from the game. That you do not need to play the game at all to participate in the community. Right. Or sorry, that's not true. You wouldn't enjoy participating in the community if you didn't play the game at all. But you don't need to participate in the community at all, is what I meant. To fully get everything out of the actual physical game itself. You never need to go out and look at anybody else's opinion or look at a guide or anything else or go on the subreddit to, play the game. But it enriches it. Yeah, you're missing out on a lot. Yeah. So anyways.
Yeah, it's funny too. I mean, we're getting asked what seem to be very similar questions, but I feel like we're pulling something different out of it when we come back to it after a bit, having just more time to let it percolate in our heads.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do miss those replays. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just...
there's a real sort of sense of loss. Because I think that's the thing about these, you know, games, is that when they are a social space, and that's what I've talked about before, is the really interesting thing about big tentpole AAA releases, playing them live versus playing them later. And I think I've mentioned this before, because when I started playing video games, I used to get stuff for exceptionally cheap. I had very little disposable income.
Right.
And I had a lot of time to play video games because I was a child and I didn't have a lot of responsibilities, and it was pretty kick-ass. But then the older you get more money, and then you get less time to that you need to stretch that dollar. And so now I have more games than I ever need to play. And a lot of the stuff that I do play ends up being, you know, like little, like Injustice and other little side things that you can steal time for. Right. And so I was getting all these games for, you know, 75%, 80%, 90% off. And I was coming to these communities and spaces, and I would be looking up guides and stuff, and you're sort of unearthing stuff that people have found before you, and there's, you know, rich discussions, and to some extent for the really big things, like there's still memes about Skyrim, there's still all of that. Right. But it's a very different experience to be playing a game while people are talking about it, while stuff is happening. Well, you know, every time a new Bethesda game would come out, the other thing is that it would always be only like 3/4 working. Yeah. Yeah. There'd be a huge number of bugs, and people would talk about all these bugs, right? And all the ways that things used to work. And I was coming to these games as polished as they were ever going to get, right? Mm. You know, if they released in these half-broken states. And so you lose the opportunity to be part of that cultural conversation. And even if you don't actually, you know, talk about it with anyone necessarily, that there's these conversations happening around you. And if you look stuff up, there's people finding new things, and, you know, it's a big, you know, experience. There's gaming YouTubers who are posting the reviews or gameplay videos and all that stuff. And then it quiets down, and things, the cycle for this stuff is also not that long when it's a single player game. So it goes away pretty fast. Like, you know, I played Cyberpunk, like, a few days after it came out. Mm-hmm. And I got to experience that buggy mess that caused, you know, CD Projekt Red to get sued by their investors for false advertising, and, you know, made the PlayStation pull it from their digital stores and all that stuff. And I was, you know, kind of sitting in the middle of it. And it was a very different experience to, you know, coming to the game, you know, a long time later when it's, you know, ridiculously on sale, and the things that have been said about it are already, you know, gone.
So that's, as you're saying that, I'm thinking you're totally describing, I never played one of those tentpole AAA games, but you're totally describing my experience with Injustice. Yeah. Where we got a chance to be right there. I mean, the cost of buy-in was nothing. Yeah. But there was a huge amount of interest in it when there was new characters, new modes, new this, new that. And we got to be a part of that. And that really was why it was so exciting. Yeah. Because even before they had multiplayer mode, before you could play with other people. Yeah. That whole experience of, hey, do you remember when Survivor first came out?
I do remember when Survivor first came out.
And we thought, oh, we need to do some videos on how to play. And we did it like right there that first week. That was exciting.
Yeah, or when multiplayer first dropped, and I was like talking about like gear combinations with like my friends on the bus when we were at summer camp, like on our way to like something. Yeah.
Wait, did they know you had a channel?
Yeah, they did.
Okay, so they knew that what you were talking about was that kind of conversation was a manifestation of something that was happening at a bigger, broader level.
Yeah, it was a whole huge conversation though. Like we would like play like on our breaks, and we just like look at each other playing stuff like that, and you know, it was a really strong social experience, despite the fact that we could never actually just go head to head and fight, you know? Right. I remember somebody like saving up enough credits that they were going to buy like 5 packs for it, and they really wanted like Aquaman, and they got it, and then we're like, yeah, we're all like really hyped up because they got the specific character that they wanted after they saved up enough credits. They're like, come on. Right. And they knew exactly what they wanted, or like knowing that Shazam was there, but not any of us actually having Shazam yet. Right. And knowing that they were a chase, and then going, oh, when I get him, I'm going to put him with this gear, I'm going to put him with this gear. And, you know, oh, think about that. You can make this team, right? And then just that sort of bouncing off each other.
I really do miss making those sneak preview videos where with each update, new characters would come, and before their release dates, before the challenge was coming, that we'd have an account where we could demonstrate.
It was pretty exciting, yeah. And so that is a really sort of unique experience, and I think there is for anybody who's like had that experience on the internet. There's a lot of stuff on the internet. For the fact that there's documentation for a lot of it, there's a huge volume of information and data out there, but there's also a huge amount of places and spaces that, you know, the people say that it's going to be there forever, and they're dead. They're dead and gone, and, you know, maybe you can find them, but there's forums with like thousands of, you know, pages of discussion on them that haven't been, you know, updated in a very long time.
Right.
And so I think everybody who's discovering topics also gets a little bit of a chance to be sort of like an amateur archaeologist. You get to sort of poke around in places and find stuff. And so I think, you know, and it's interesting, actually, one of the things is the way that everything's become centralized. It's getting harder, I think, to find and stumble onto those spaces organically when they're gone, right? The way that you're finding most stuff through Google, and you're naturally sort of getting the stuff that's still being worked on and updated and has, you know, the SEO for whatever new stuff, right? The way that the content is sort of bubbling to the top, there's sort of it's like when cities are built on top of cities. There is we're sort of going to all these hubs where, you know, a site like Instagram or Facebook, right? Their whole point is they're giving you the new stuff. There's years and years. And if you go on like an individual person's profile, there's a huge amount of, you can go all the way back. But if you want to find like the way that conversations were happening, you know, a year ago or 2 years ago on Facebook, you can. Maybe with the Wayback Machine if you wanted to, but it's really hard. You don't have these things preserved the same way, because there's a lot of algorithms now that are based off of recommending you the fresh stuff and that are keeping you with sort of the good stuff. And so everything's jumbled together, and they're just sort of naturally floating to everything to the surface. And that's why there's do you know Wint or Drill?
Yes, I do.
You know the way that he'll retweet people from like 2013 who have like 5 followers who like stopped posting a while ago, and it'll just be somebody who's like, you know, like, I'm lonely, does anyone want a message? And it's like, and if you click on their page, they have like 5 tweets, and it's like some like middle-aged like dad who like just went through a divorce, and you're like, how does he find this stuff? And it's because, you know, you're so used to just seeing what everybody's talking about right at this second on Twitter that it's weird for him to be able to just sort of reach his hand into this grab bag of trash, like discarded stuff. And so those ones for me are always, they're entertaining, but they always make me feel a little weird, because I'm like, there's all of this stuff, and we really are, the way the internet is, I think it used to be a lot less organized fundamentally and a lot less centralized, and it's weird for all the data that's still out there, the ways that we can only interact with it in these sort of piecemeal fashion, and the way that it's hard to sort of actually have that like sense of what,
like, an uncurated experience. So if it feels to me like what you're describing is that the fact that it starts off with this huge spectrum of possibilities, and not possibilities but actualities, and that in a lot of ways the experiences become narrow because certain voices, certain things have become so much more amplified, and a lot of what's lost is it's just lost as it gets older. And so, but
it's still there. That's a weird thing. Right? You know, you move houses, and you've moved all your stuff, and when you lose something, it's just sort of gone, right? There's a lot of physical goods where it's either there or it's not. And the internet exists in this weird state where it's, a lot of it is still there, but it's hard or nearly impossible to access. So
I mean, you say some of it, I mean, pretty much with the Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive, it's pretty much all of it if you have the patience to dig. Like what do you...
I've used the Wayback Machine, and there's been pages I haven't found. It's different. Some stuff is cached, but some stuff isn't. I mean, they have crawlers, and that's the interesting thing about that is, but you can't go on like Wayback Machine and then Wayback Google and then go to other pages through Google that are still
you have
old.
to know what you're looking for.
Yeah, you have to know what you're looking for. It's you're like searching through like a library of content, but there's, you know, trillions of messages and web pages that you never would know to look for. Yeah, and the way that we are looking at stuff, it has been increasingly... Like, recently I tried to find somebody who I really liked on TikTok, Skatey420, and she's still active on Twitter. And I tried to look her up, and I realized that she was banned, and all of her content's just gone. So there's also some stuff
banned off TikTok or Twitter.
Banned from TikTok.
Oh, what? How do you get banned from TikTok?
A lot of people get banned from TikTok. It seemingly happens for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of people who I feel like shouldn't have gotten banned on TikTok who do, and there's also a lot of people who really seems like they should get banned on TikTok who don't. It seems like it's a very unbalanced system. There's a lot of
arbitrary.
There's a lot of criticisms about how TikTok handles a lot of things. Yeah, but so there's stuff that you also, just because of the way things work, that you assume is going to be around forever, that can just get wiped really easy. And I don't think there is a repository of all of her content. I don't know. I didn't do a huge amount of digging, but I didn't find any if there is. So yeah, I don't know if there is an equivalent, right? Because I only know my own lived experiences. I only know what I've been around for and what I've experienced. But it's really weird to have stuff sort of to interact with the internet, because most of it is a really smooth, very sort of centralized, sanitized experience. And it's weird when you do stumble on those like just sort of dead data, dead spaces, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So capricious. That was the word I was thinking of. Oh, I guess it is a little bit sad too. I was thinking, you know what, when you're talking about that, I mean, I don't know, maybe I know what you know, but I don't know if the people who are listening know that I have a special interest in hand strength.
Yeah.
And I remember the one thing that inspired me all these years ago. I mean, the grip board is good. It's still alive. But there's a guy who had done, who had certified as Captain Crush. Mm-hmm. And his partner was also interested in it. And I remember there was something on he had this GeoCities page. Yeah. That was really inspirational and interesting. Yeah. And I went looking for it the other day and couldn't find it. Yeah. And it's that, even knowing where it was, and there's something that was it felt like it was so important when I saw it, because it changed. It's a big deal. It changed the direction I took a lot of my workouts. I mean, I know I posted some of my workouts, some of my personal bests on our channel too, but that was foundational to me. Like if I hadn't stumbled upon that, I never would have gotten into grip.
Yeah, so you looked at it and you tried to go on a pilgrimage back to it and you didn't find it, and it was gone. I think that's the other thing about the internet, is that you expect a lot of stuff to stay there. And so then when it doesn't, you have a different sort of understanding. Like when you have a conversation with somebody, I never go, oh, let me just like, Control F search like the words that we've said to each other out loud. Right. But that's even on this channel, and I go, oh, we talked about this. I know we talked about this. And I just like, I don't have the tools. I'm not going to be able to, even if I wanted to, access that conversation again. Right. And I kind of feel like I should. So there's this it's a weird balance of stuff with things online. And, people can find stuff. That's like when people are like dig up like old tweets, or like, with Joe Rogan, right? Digging up the stuff he said. Right. People can find stuff. And when you're dedicated, there was recently like a Flash game that I found. And there was a little while there where I was like, oh, I love this game. And I could picture it in my head. And I wanted to find it so bad, but I felt like I didn't have the tools. And so, Flash was down. Flash is not there anymore, so you have to do these weird workarounds for Flash, and I didn't know the game, and I was like, oh. And so I like made a post on Reddit, and then I ended up finding it because there's like a Flash game like subreddit where you can ask for them and stuff. So it's just weird. It feels like there's all these artifacts, and that's the other thing about like Flash games, right? Is that I can play most of them. The majority of them I can play if I do workarounds. Some of them though, I find them and I know them and I want to play them, and I'm like, oh, I remember this, and then I just can't. And so there's it's a weird sort of sense of loss when I'm sitting in front of the game that I remember and that I wanted to play, and it's just that it's like a cruel twist of fate that this one game is not playable on Flash. It's like a weird experience, and I'm not nearly old enough to have any sort of, I don't have like there's not like a long tail of nostalgia for me. It's all pretty recent stuff, relatively speaking.
So is that crazy then? That because is it just that the people who have money and nostalgia are the ones that are able to bring things up? Because I'm thinking about all those consoles, even like 10, 15 years ago, where you could play 80s video games on these little things that you plugged into your TV. And that's still happening, but they're just making it better with better interfaces. And you're talking about stuff that was just less than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That feels like it's completely lost and will never be recovered because there hasn't been the audience for the same way. So is it that there's an outsized influence of the 80s and 90s, or is it really just that these are the people now with money and the motivation to capitalize on that nostalgia in a way that they can't, because the people logic for stuff from years ago.
Yeah. Stuff is going to come back around. I mean,
Is it though?
I literally I had a conversation in one of my classes today, like right after the class, about like Club Penguin.
Oh my God.
Club Penguin. Yeah.
Club Penguin.
But, you know, and
Webkins.
Because Club Penguin is down now.
Is it?
Yeah, Club Penguin is down. And
so the servers are not functional.
I think there might be somebody else running a like sort of Club Penguin fan thing. But I don't even know. I think there's still a way of accessing it. But yeah, no, so that's the it's a weird balance of stuff. I don't know if I have anything to say about it, but it's weird. I have a lot of thoughts about it, and we can sort of talk around it. I don't know if we're gonna hit on anything, you know, especially poignant or
well, I don't think we're gonna find out or have real answers to any of these things that we're sort of questioning until another 10, 20 years from now. Yeah. When the generation that was influenced by that comes of an age where they have the money to actually feed that nostalgia.
I think it's a lot of things. I think it's also like, it's money, but it's also the tools to, you know, make these things come back, right? Because I think more than just money, you know, for a lot of this stuff, like what you need like people to make emulators, right? So you need time and talent, and you know, maybe that's the other thing for a lot of this stuff is that if there's questionable legality, because a lot of these projects are not necessarily, you're not going to come back to them and have the same people, you know, want to spend all of this time. Like people who made Flash games, a lot of people who made the best Flash games work for game studios now. Right? They're some sort of, you know, coders, right? So they have other work. And so if they come to it, I mean, maybe they come back in like 10 years, right? They get a nice little payday from working on their own stuff. But, you know, these are also to some extent like early creative pursuits of these people. Right. And they might, you know, be moving on to what they feel is bigger and better things. So a lot of it is, you know, like you don't necessarily want somebody to reboot it. You maybe just want like somebody to have an emulator and then like technically, I think illegally in terms of copyright, like put these away to play it back up. And for a lot of for people who release these games for free anyways, I mean, it's not like they're making more or less money than they were originally for putting these games up. There's a lot of people who are putting a lot of time and effort into just making cool things to experience for free on the internet. And that's something I'm kind of sad about, is I don't feel like there's as many gaming experiences that are weird and experimental and not for money. I think there's still cool games out there if you want to find them. But I think I think one of the other things that, you know, has been lost a little bit from the earlier internet, and I see glimmers of it in like how well like the Injustice mobile wiki has been maintained and stuff like that. Right. And like the subreddit and moderators. And there still are a lot of people who just want to curate cool experiences for people. Right. But like even this, like our YouTube channel, we're here partly because of the ad revenue and partly because of the patrons. And
ad revenue is nothing.
Yeah, I know. But that would we be doing it if there was never any ad revenue or patrons or anything?
No,
would we have just been doing
for sure not.
So I mean our content is I think mostly free from that sort of capital, and mostly free from the influence of you know, acquiring value. But I feel like there's a lot less experiences out there that are purely interested in making stuff for people and being excited in the process and building those spaces. And there's a lot more, especially as things get sort of more centralized, there's a lot more focus on sort of extracting value.
So the last bit I'll say maybe is like a story, like a hopeful kind of story. Yeah. Because you talk about this stuff and it reminds me of back in the, I want to say 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, when DVDs were still a thing and popular shows would get their DVD releases, and they were really expensive. And if you weren't a popular show, you wouldn't get a release. And it felt like that some of those niche shows would get lost forever. Yeah. And the one that I'm thinking about is a show called My So-Called Life. It was where Claire Danes got her big start. Yeah. It was a great drama. It ended after one season. Mm-hmm. It got really great critical reviews, very poor numbers. And before there was any inkling that maybe I think the Disney Channel ended up rerunning some of the episodes. Yeah. but that there was no hope that we'd ever get to see it again. And if you saw it, it was
gone.
It was gone. It was, you saw it on, what is it? What do you call it? Network TV?
Yeah, cable?
Well, no, this was ABC. So
Okay.
it would have been, or was it CBS? I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. But that they would be lost. And so there was a huge campaign. It was a ground roots campaign to try to get it released on DVD. And then there's a whole other story where this one company had promised to make it, and they took... Okay, so here's the thing.
Yeah.
Single season TV show. They were selling it for, I think, $200.
Ooh.
It would come with like a special lunchbox.
Yeah.
And a special DVD, with
Collector's edition, like steel case or something.
Yeah, and the steel case was a lunchbox.
Yeah.
And so and then they went out of business.
Yeah.
And they didn't not deliver it, but they delivered it poorly, so that a lot of people didn't get it or had to wait a long time, or they got double billed. $200. That was a lot of money. Then.
Yeah.
But it eventually got made, and that was the first show that demonstrated that there was still value in low rating shows, and that people would be willing to spend money to get it. So that even though back then, before that, you never would have imagined that something with that small an audience would have enough capital to justify a product so that you could actually have it long term. Like, I'd be able to get at it after it had gone off the air.
Yeah.
So that leaves me hopeful that maybe another 10, 15, 20 years, the stuff that you're nostalgic for will have a revival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways. So yeah, lots of food for thought.
Yeah.
I think that about does it for this episode. A lot longer than we normally go, but we had some stuff to say.
Yeah.
So to finish up, I'd like to give a shout out to Eliza John Cena Caton. You can't see her. Her time is now. I think this is probably going to be the last week in the wrestler themed ones, just because.
I don't even get that.
John Cena's theme song, the ba 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 ba. My time is up. Your time is now.
Oh.
You can't see me. My time is now. And then he does the thing where he sort of holds his elbow and he waves his hand in front of his face. The viewers can't see this, but you can see where it goes.
Oh, is it like
you can't see me?
It's like an adult version of Peekaboo?
No, maybe. I don't know how to interpret and answer that question. Okay. I know what you're saying, but I don't know how to answer. No, John Cena, the wrestler.
Yeah.
Anyways, and we'd also like to give a huge thank you to all the lovely folks who support us on Patreon.
That would be Victor Gomez, Consul Peasant, and Edwoon at the top tier last word, Sinemac and Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier, Shawn, Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., Irvin Ruiz, and Eddydoo at the credited level, and Chris Wolf, Scarlett Danny, Awesome Gamer 2for1, Pavu RS, Gavin Malott, and Isfar E at the gratitude level.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Komoda.